A black family, the Johnsons, moves into a picturesque suburban neighborhood called Willow Creek. The sun bathes the quiet streets in a warm glow as Michael and Angela Johnson unload boxes from their moving truck. Their children, 13-year-old Jasmine and 8-year-old Kevin, run excitedly around the front yard of their new home on Elm Street, marveling at the space and the towering oak trees that line the sidewalk. Michael, a tall man with a calm demeanor, has recently been appointed the new police chief of Willow Creek. His deep brown eyes reflect a sense of responsibility and hope for his family's new beginning. Angela, his wife, is a dedicated school teacher with a warm smile that seems to put everyone at ease. As they carry boxes into the house, they share a glance filled with optimism. "This place is perfect," Angela says, setting a box down in the living room. "I can already picture our family dinners here." Michael nods, looking around. It's everything we've hoped for. A fresh start. As they settle in, the Johnsons are eager to become part of the community. They wave at passing neighbors and encourage their children to make new friends. Jasmine is excited about starting at her new school and talks endlessly about trying out for the soccer team. Kevin is thrilled by the prospect of backyard adventures and new playmates. Unbeknownst to them, not everyone is pleased with their arrival. Across the street, an elderly man named Mr. Harris watches them from his window. Having lived in Willow Creek for over 40 years, Mr. Harris prides himself on knowing everyone in the neighborhood. With his silver hair neatly combed and always dressed in a pressed shirt and slacks, he values tradition and is wary of change. One afternoon, Angela is planting flowers in the front yard when Mr. Harris approaches, his cane tapping lightly on the pavement. "Good afternoon," he says, his tone polite but reserved. Angela looks up, wiping soil from her hands. "Hello, you must be our neighbor. I'm Angela Johnson." "Arthur Harris," he replies with a slight nod. "Lived here a long time." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Harris. It's such a beautiful neighborhood. We're thrilled to be here." He glances at the flowers she's planting. "Those azaleas might not do well in this spot. Soil's a bit too acidic," he remarks. "Oh, I appreciate the tip. I'm still learning about the local gardening conditions," Angela responds, maintaining her warm demeanor. Mr. Harris offers a thin smile. "Well, if you need any advice, I've been tending gardens here for decades." "That would be wonderful. Maybe you could stop by sometime and give me some pointers." He hesitates, then says, "Perhaps," before turning and walking away. Angela watches him go, a slight furrow in her brow. She senses his reluctance, but hopes that with time, he will warm up to them. When she tells Michael about the encounter, he listens thoughtfully. "Maybe he's just set in his ways," Michael suggests. "Moving can be hard for everyone, even when it's someone else doing the moving." "You're probably right," Angela agrees. "We'll just keep being friendly." Determined to integrate into the community, the Johnsons decide to host a neighborhood barbecue. They spend the next week preparing, sending out handwritten invitations, and setting up the backyard. Jasmine creates colorful flyers adorned with doodles, and Kevin helps arrange tables and chairs. They make a point to personally invite all their neighbors, walking door to door. When they reach Mr. Harris's house, Angela and Jasmine step onto his neatly swept porch and ring the doorbell. After a moment, he opens the door, his expression neutral. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harris," Angela begins cheerfully. "We're hosting a barbecue this Saturday, and would love for you to join us." Jasmine holds out an invitation. "We hope you can come. There will be lots of good food." He looks at the invitation but doesn't take it immediately. "I appreciate the offer," he says slowly, "but I keep to myself these days." "Well, if you change your mind, we'd be happy to have you," Angela says, her smile unwavering. He finally takes the invitation. "I'll think about it," he replies before closing the door gently. As they walk back home, Jasmine looks up at her mother. "Do you think he'll come?" "I hope so," Angela says softly. "But even if he doesn't, at least he knows he's welcome." The day of the barbecue arrives, and the Johnsons are a flurry of activity. The aroma of grilled chicken and smoked ribs fills the air. A playlist of upbeat music adds to the festive atmosphere. Neighbors begin to arrive, bringing side dishes and desserts. Laughter and conversation flow easily as children play tag on the lawn. Michael mans the grill, engaging guests with his easygoing charm. Angela circulates among the attendees, making sure everyone feels included. Jasmine and Kevin lead a group of kids in a game of scavenger hunt, their laughter echoing down the street. Despite the growing crowd, Mr. Harris is noticeably absent. From behind his curtain, he watches the gathering with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The sound of music and merriment seems to accentuate his solitude. As the afternoon wears on, the party shows no signs of slowing down. Suddenly, 2 police officers appear at the entrance to the backyard. The lively chatter hushes as guests notice their presence. Michael steps forward, his expression one of polite inquiry. "Good evening, officers. Is everything all right?" he asks. One officer, reading from a small notepad, replies, "We received a noise complaint about loud music and a possible disturbance at this address." Michael's eyes flicker with understanding. "I see. We're hosting a neighborhood barbecue. I wasn't aware the music was too loud, but we'll certainly turn it down." The second officer looks up and does a double take. "Chief Johnson?" Michael nods. "That's right." The officers exchange glances. "We didn't realize this was your residence," the first officer says, a bit sheepishly. "Regardless, if there's a complaint, we want to address it," Michael says calmly. The second officer clears his throat. "Seems like a friendly gathering. Sorry to interrupt. We'll let the complainant know everything is fine." As they depart, Angela lowers the volume of the music. The guests gradually resume their conversations, but the mood has shifted slightly. "Who would call the police on a barbecue?" one neighbor whispers. Angela catches Michael's eye. "Do you think it was Mr. Harris?" she asks quietly. He sighs. "It's possible, but let's not jump to conclusions." Determined not to let the incident ruin the event, they focus on their guests. By evening's end, the barbecue is deemed a success by those who attended. As they clean up, Jasmine asks, "Why would someone want to stop our party?" Michael kneels down to her level. "Sometimes people are uncomfortable with things they're not used to, but what's important is how we respond. We choose kindness." The next day, Michael decides to address the issue directly. He walks across the street to Mr. Harris's house and knocks on the door. After a moment, Mr. Harris opens it, surprise flickering across his face. "Michael," he says cautiously. "Mr. Harris, I wanted to talk to you about yesterday," Michael begins. "If the music was too loud or if we disturbed you, I apologize." Mr. Harris shifts his weight. "It's not the noise," he admits. I like things quiet." "I understand," Michael says gently. "We want to be good neighbors. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make you more comfortable." There's a pause before Mr. Harris replies, "I've seen a lot of changes over the years. Sometimes it's hard to keep up." "Change can be difficult," Michael agrees, "but it can also bring good things. Maybe we can find common ground." Mr. Harris considers this. "Perhaps," he says finally. Over the following weeks, the Johnsons continue to reach out. Angela brings over homemade cookies one afternoon, which Mr. Harris accepts with a faint smile. Jasmine offers to help him with his groceries when she sees him returning from the store. One Saturday, as Michael trims the hedges, Mr. Harris approaches. "Your garden is coming along," he remarks. "Thanks. Angela's been working hard on it," Michael replies. "She's got a good touch with the azaleas," Mr. Harris acknowledges. Michael seizes the opportunity. "Would you like to come over for dinner sometime?" "Just a quiet meal." Mr. Harris hesitates. "I suppose that would be all right." That evening, Mr. Harris joins the Johnsons at their dining table. The conversation starts cautiously but gradually warms. He shares stories of Willow Creek's history, and the children listen with rapt attention. "You know," Mr. Harris says, "this neighborhood used to have a small orchard where your house stands." "Really?" Kevin exclaims. "What kind of trees?" "Apple trees. The best you've ever tasted," Mr. Harris chuckles. By the end of the evening, there's a noticeable thaw in Mr. Harris's demeanor. As he prepares to leave, he thanks them. "It's been a long time since I've had dinner with neighbors." "You're welcome anytime," Angela assures him. From that point on, Mr. K. Harris begins to engage more. He joins Michael on morning walks, discussing everything from local news to gardening tips. Angela invites him to her book club, and he surprises everyone with his insightful commentary. The real turning point comes when the Johnsons propose creating a community garden in a vacant lot at the end of the street. They present the idea at a neighborhood meeting, highlighting how it could bring everyone together. "Imagine a place where we can all contribute," Angela enthuses. Fresh vegetables, flowers, a space for the kids to learn about nature. There's general interest, but also logistical concerns. Mr. Harris stands up. I've got experience with gardening, he says. I'd be willing to help coordinate. His offer lends credibility to the project, and soon, many neighbors volunteer. The community garden becomes a collaborative effort, with residents of all ages participating. On planting day, the atmosphere is lively. Mr. Harris instructs the children on proper planting techniques, his earlier reservations all but forgotten. Jasmine and Kevin work diligently, excited to see the fruits of their labor. As the garden flourishes, so does the sense of community. Neighbors share harvests and exchange recipes. Weekend picnics become common, with the garden as a backdrop. One afternoon, as the sun casts a golden hue over the blooming flowers, Mr. Harris sits on a bench beside Michael. You've done good things here, he says quietly. We all have, Michael replies. It's been a group effort. Mr. Harris nods. I was wrong about you and your family. Change isn't always easy, but it's not necessarily bad. Michael smiles. I'm glad you feel that way. At the annual neighborhood festival, Mr. Harris takes the stage during the closing remarks. I want to acknowledge the Johnsons, he begins. Their arrival has reminded me, and perhaps all of us, that community is strengthened by openness and cooperation. They've brought new life to Willow Creek. Applause fills the air. Angela wipes a tear from her eye, and Michael wraps an arm around her shoulders. Back at home, the Johnsons reflect on their journey. It's amazing how things have turned around, Angela says. It just took patience and understanding, Michael responds. Jasmine grins. And maybe some really good cookies. They all laugh. Kevin adds, Don't forget the garden. That was the best idea ever. Agreed, Michael says. It's become the heart of our neighborhood. As they prepare for dinner, there's a knock at the door. Kevin opens it to find Mr. Harris holding a basket of freshly picked tomatoes. Thought you might like these, he says. Thank you. Come in, Angela invites. He steps inside, the familiar warmth of their home welcoming him. The conversation flows easily, filled with laughter and shared stories. Later that evening, as the stars twinkle overhead, the Johnsons and Mr. Harris sit on the porch, comfortable in their companionship. Funny how things work out, Mr. Harris muses. Life has a way of surprising us, Michael agrees. Mr. Harris looks at the family, a genuine smile on his face. I'm glad you moved here. We're glad too, Angela replies. Willow Creek feels like home now. Jasmine and Kevin exchange a glance before Kevin speaks up. Mr. Harris, do you think we could plant apple trees in the garden? He chuckles. I think that's a splendid idea. We'll make it our next project. As the night settles in, there's a sense of fulfillment. The Johnsons have not only found a home, but have also helped to cultivate a community grounded in acceptance and friendship. What would you have done in our situation? Michael asks softly. Probably the same, Angela answers. Stay true to ourselves and keep reaching out. Mr. Harris nods thoughtfully. And sometimes, it's the new roots that strengthen the old trees. The porch falls silent as they all take in the wisdom of his words. In that moment, it's clear that they've all grown, much like the garden they've nurtured together.